In this series, we're diving deep into How to Succeed by Orison Swett Marden, a classic that helped launch the personal development movement more than a century ago. Each episode unpacks its big ideas and brings them into focus for today's high-performance entrepreneurs, leaders, and builders. If you're ready to lead with clarity, grow with intention, and ground your ambition in principles that last, make sure to subscribe. Let's get into it.
Have you ever felt like you're starting from scratch? Or, maybe even behind the curve, looking up at what feels like a really steep climb? Perhaps you're dealing with the pressure of student debt, or maybe a job market that just feels fundamentally stacked against you. Or maybe it's just that little voice, that imposter syndrome whispering you're not quite ready. If any of that sounds familiar, well, good. Because today we're diving deep into why that exact starting point, that thing you might see as a disadvantage, could actually be your biggest advantage. Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're continuing our journey through Orison Swett Marden's classic book, How to Succeed. And for this deep dive, we're unpacking Chapter 3, How Did He Begin? Our mission is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the core wisdom from this really foundational chapter, look at it through a modern lens, and figure out exactly how these, timeless principles can fuel your journey no matter where you're starting from right now.
Yeah, and this chapter is built on this really rich collection of biographical sketches and observations that Marden pulled together from his era. As we go through them, we'll meet some truly remarkable people who overcame just staggering disadvantages. We're talking deep poverty, zero formal education, sometimes serious physical issues, or just facing down intense societal prejudice. But what's really fascinating, I think, isn't just what they achieved, it's how Marden kind of distills their really diverse experiences into these universal principles. He shows us pretty compellingly how their tough beginnings weren't just obstacles, but were actually formative. They shaped these extraordinary paths. These aren't just old stories. They're almost like templates for building resilience and, carving out your own destiny.
Okay, so our goal then is to translate these really compelling historical stories into genuinely actionable insights for you listening right now. We'll try to interpret any language that feels a bit maybe dated and really pinpoint the fundamental truths about perseverance, about radical self-reliance, and that surprising power that often comes from, humble origins.
Okay, let's get into this first big idea. Right at the start, Marden hits us with this really powerful, and maybe for some, a slightly uncomfortable idea. That a difficult beginning isn't just a handicap. Often, it's the actual catalyst for greatness. He sets the tone right away with a quote from Seth Low, who was a pretty prominent figure back then. Low said, "There can be no doubt that the captains of industry today are men who began life as poor boys."
Mm-hmm. And then there's the novelist Ouida, who gives us this really striking analogy, doesn't she?
Oh, yeah, the North Wind one. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's exactly. Poverty is very terrible, and sometimes kills the very soul within us. But it is the north wind that lashes men into Vikings. It is the soft, luscious south wind which lulls them to lotus dreams. Powerful stuff. And then, of course, Shakespeare. Can't forget Shakespeare. 'Tis a common proof that lowliness is young ambition's ladder.
Right. And if we connect this to the bigger picture Marden is painting, it's clear he's not, romanticizing poverty. Wow. He's not saying suffering is somehow good or necessary for success. What he's doing is highlighting the qualities that these tough starts often cultivate. I mean, think about it. Poverty, or really any significant disadvantage, it forces you into this state of, needing to be resourceful, needing resilience, developing this deep hunger for improvement. It acts as this powerful motivator,
Yeah.
It's very different from the complacency that comfort can sometimes breed. That north wind analogy is especially good here. It's about a force that strips away everything non-essential. It demands adaptability, inner strength, focus. It doesn't let you just drift. That north wind idea feels so relevant today, even if it looks different. I mean, how do you see those kinds of pressures showing up now beyond just, literal lack of money?
That's a really good question, because the essence of the north wind, that pressure that forces growth, it's absolutely still around. Today, maybe it looks like crippling student debt that pushes you to make the absolute most of every skill, every earning opportunity you can possibly find. Or maybe it's job insecurity, right? The economy changes so fast, it forces you to constantly upskill, maybe pivot, be proactive about finding opportunities instead of just waiting. It could even be lacking connections in a world that feels super networked, that forces you to build your own network through sheer initiative and showing your value.
Or like you said earlier, that imposter syndrome.
Exactly. Even that internal battle, that imposter syndrome, while it feels awful, it can paradoxically push you to constantly refine what you do, prove your abilities, not just to others, but maybe mostly to yourself. It's about feeling just enough pressure, that right amount, that drives you to adapt, innovate, and build a kind of grit you might not have developed otherwise.
And what about the Shakespeare line? Lowliness is young ambition's ladder. How does starting at the bottom, maybe with no status, no resources, actually give you a unique perspective? It seems backward, but Marden clearly sees it as a plus.
It does seem backward at first glance, yeah. But it raises this really important question. What do you learn when you've experienced every single step of a process right from the very beginning? When you start from lowliness, you've often done the grunt work, right? Maybe swept the floors, handled tasks the bosses take for granted, maybe worn multiple hats. You've seen every part of an operation, every rung on that ladder from the inside out.
You understand the nuts and bolts.
Precisely. And that understanding, it's not theoretical, it's deep, it's experiential, and that becomes this huge asset as you move up. You appreciate the foundational stuff, you empathize better with everyone on the team, and often you're more innovative because you had to solve problems with limited resources. You know what it takes because, well, you were what it took.
We see this so clearly in the story of Hezekiah Conant. He became a millionaire manufacturer, but listen to his start. Marden tells us he left home in Dudley, Massachusetts, May 1845. He was just 15. He talked his dad into letting him go with him to Worcester to find work. And they see this ad in the Worcester County Gazette. Boy wanted. At the Gazette office, a well-disposed boy able to do heavy rolling.
Heavy rolling doesn't sound easy.
No kidding. His pay was $30 the first year, $35 the second, $40 the third, plus board. That's it. He started the very next day. And heavy rolling was serious business. The paper used a Washington hand press, notoriously tough. They printed maybe 2,000 copies an issue. That meant 2 intense 10-hour sessions a week. All day Friday, and then Tuesdays he'd start around 3 or 4 in the afternoon and often not finish until 3 a.m. Wednesday morning. Just completely exhausted, sore from the constant heavy work. But wait, there's more to his lowly start. Besides the printing, he had to carry huge amounts of water every day from this pump way behind the block, haul it around front, then up 2 flights of stairs. He literally said he was everybody's servant. Endured nicknames, swept the whole office, built fires, ran errands for everyone, posted bills around town, carried papers, basically waited on the editor constantly. He summed it up perfectly. He led the life of a genuine printer's devil. That was the term for the lowest apprentice, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this isn't just a tough job, it's a crucible. It's exactly that north wind we were talking about. This environment, it forced him to learn every single tiny detail of the business from the absolute ground floor. He internalized the value of hard work, attention to detail, total self-reliance. He wasn't just doing tasks. He was absorbing the whole system. And when he finally showed he could set type and run the press well, he got promoted. He called it his first success. And here's the really critical part, the part that still resonates today. He said from that day on, he never asked anyone to get him a job. Never used a recommendation letter.
Wow.
Yeah, he always just let his abilities and his character speak for themselves.
Yeah.
He said he gave potential employers all facilities to learn of my abilities and character. That speaks volumes about the kind of deep, self-made confidence that comes from those kinds of beginnings. He didn't just learn a trade. He forged this unshakable belief in himself. That became the foundation for everything else.
That kind of confidence, that ability to just do things and trust yourself, it brings us to the next big idea Marden pushes. This crucible of self-reliance and resourcefulness. So many of these stories show this incredible degree of self-reliance, usually born out of just sheer necessity. These people didn't wait for opportunities, they made them or grabbed them fiercely. Look at Horace Greeley, founder of the New York Tribune. When he was almost 21, he wasn't exactly impressive looking. Marden describes him as tall, gawky, tow-colored hair, pale face, kind of a whining voice, not exactly commanding presence. But underneath that, there was this fierce resolve. He famously spent only $6 on himself over 7 months, earned about $135 doing substitute work at the Erie Gazette.
$6 in 7 months. Wow.
Yeah. Kept only $15 for himself, gave $120 to his dad for their new farm. Total self-sacrifice. He even camped out alone sometimes to guard their sheep from wolves.
Yeah.
Just raw, practical self-reliance. Then he decides to try his luck in New York City. He walks 60 miles through the woods to Buffalo, takes a canal boat to Albany, then a barge down the Hudson. Arrives in New York at sunrise, August 18th, 1831, with basically nothing but a small bundle of clothes and, A whole lot of ambition.
And for days, he just wanders around New York, hitting up tons of printing offices, asking if they needed a hand, a skilled printer. But it was just, no, 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 everywhere he went. Apparently his quaint appearance, maybe his country clothes or manner, made people suspicious. They thought he might be an escaped apprentice, which was a serious issue back then. So instant prejudice just based on how he looked. He finally gets a shot at West's printing office. They were working on this really complicated job, a polyglot testament, a Bible in multiple languages.
Tough first gig.
Super tough. The foreman was doubtful, and the owner actually wanted to fire him after the first day because he looked awkward. But Greeley didn't just meet expectations. He blew them away. He delivered the largest and most correct day's work that had then been done. He didn't argue. He just showed them.
And from that really tough, unpromising start, just 10 years later, he's a partner in a printing office. Founds the New Yorker, great paper, but not profitable. Then the log cabin for a presidential campaign, huge circulation, 90,000 copies. Still no profit, though. Sold for a penny. Then finally, the New York Tribune. Borrows $1,000, prints 5,000 copies of the first issue. He said it was hard to even give them away at first.
Hard to imagine now.
Right. But he started with 600 subscribers, and in just 6 weeks, it jumped to 11,000. The demand grew so fast they couldn't even get new machines quickly enough. And the key to all that success. Marden says the editor always tried to be right. Not just popular, not sensational, but fundamentally correct.
And that's where the real gold is, I think. How often do we let first impressions or setback define us? Greeley's story is such a powerful reminder that just grinding it out, persevering when everyone doubts you, and coupling that with this deep commitment to quality and integrity that always tried to be right, part that can completely change everything for you. It shows how crucial it is to demonstrate your value, not just talk about it. He didn't convince them with words, he convinced them with the work. That principle is just timeless, especially now when trust is so fragile.
And then there's Jay Gould, a name we associate with huge wealth, but he started small too. Marden tells this story about the 1853 World's Fair in New York. President Pierce himself saw a young Jay Gould exhibiting, get this, a patent rat trap.
A rat trap? Seriously?
Yeah. Marden says it seemed like small business, but Gould did it well and with enthusiasm, determined to do it as well as it could be done. He was supporting himself doing odd jobs back then, surveying land, building sundials for farmers for like $1 each, sometimes just taking payment in room and board.
That little anecdote, the rat trap, it actually raises a really important question for us. What's the big lesson there? It's not about how grand the task is, right? It's about the approach. Gould's story really hammers home this idea that excellence and diligence, even when applied to the most humble, seemingly minor things, they build the foundation for bigger success later. It's about developing that work ethic, that eye for detail, that commitment to doing your absolute best no matter the scale, that meticulousness, doing it as well as it could be done. It becomes a habit. It carries over. You're basically practicing success on a small scale.
We see something really similar with George Peabody. He became this millionaire banker, a huge philanthropist. But his story starts with him arriving weary, footsore, and hungry at a tavern in Concord, New Hampshire. He asks if he can sell wood just to get lodging and breakfast. Fast forward 50 years. He goes back to that same tavern, but now he's this titan of finance, one of the world's biggest bankers, hugely wealthy, known for giving so much away.
Amazing transformation.
Totally. And Bishop Fowler, reflecting on it, says, "It is one of the greatest encouragements of our age that ordinary men with extraordinary industry reach the highest stations." So let's bring this back to you, listening now. What does this actually mean for you? It means fundamentally that your current situation, no matter how humble, how tough, how small it feels, it just doesn't dictate your future, period. It's all about the extraordinary industry, that effort, that dedication, that commitment that you apply right now to whatever's in front of you. It's about the attitude, the effort, not just where you happen to start.
And beyond just being self-reliant, a lot of these people showed this almost, superhuman determination, sheer willpower, a flat-out refusal to be defined by their limits. They didn't just overcome disadvantages. They often turned those very handicaps into unique strengths, into advantages. They didn't just survive. They fundamentally changed the game based on their circumstances.
Nobody shows this better, maybe more painfully, but also more triumphantly than Frederick Douglass. He really started with less than nothing. Born into slavery, his body wasn't even legally his own. He barely saw his mother, maybe 2 or 3 times ever, and only at night when she walked 12 miles just for an hour with him, then walked back to be in the fields by dawn.
Just heartbreaking.
Unimaginable. And the rules strictly forbade slaves from learning to read or write. The system was designed to crush the spirit, not lift it.
And yet, somehow, completely under the radar, he managed to learn the alphabet from scraps of paper, from old patent medicine almanacs. Marden says he put thousands of white boys to shame by doing so. He just had this burning, unstoppable desire for knowledge that defied the whole system. At 21, he escapes slavery, goes north, works as a stevedore loading ships in New York and New Bedford. Then, at an anti-slavery meeting in Nantucket, he gets this unexpected chance to speak. He makes such a powerful impression, they immediately make him an agent for the Anti-Slavery Society.
Wow, just like that.
Pretty much. Then he studies relentlessly while traveling and lecturing, goes to Europe, lectures there. Eventually, English friends give him $750 to officially buy his freedom. He goes on to edit important newspapers like The New Era, and eventually becomes Marshal of the District of Columbia. He rose to be, as Marden puts it, the peer of any man in the country, died honored by everyone in 1895.
What's just incredible, almost mind-blowing here, is that Douglas's story isn't just about beating a disadvantage. It's about turning an objectively impossible situation into this platform for huge societal impact. His hunger for knowledge, with zero opportunity and immense risk. It's astounding. It really shows that true curiosity, the human spirit, it just can't be contained by external forces. He literally built himself into this educated, influential figure against all odds. He forged his own intellectual freedom. Another really powerful example of sheer will comes from politics. Lord Beaconsfield, Benjamin Disraeli, born Jewish in Victorian England, which was deeply anti-Semitic. Marden notes everything seemed against him in that society dominated by the Anglican elite. Yet he becomes Prime Minister of England, a political giant who shaped an empire.
And he drew inspiration from the Bible, right? Figures like Joseph and Daniel, who started as slaves or captives but rose to be prime ministers in foreign lands. He saw precedent for overcoming birth circumstances. Yeah, and he literally clawed his way up through this rigid class system. He was flamboyant, an outsider. Famously, when he was first in the House of Commons giving a speech, he got booed, ridiculed, literally hissed down by the aristocratic members who hated his background and his style.
That must have been humiliating.
Absolutely. But he just stood there, kept his cool, and said with total conviction, "The time will come when you shall hear me." And it did. The boy with supposedly no chance but a determined will didn't just get heard. He basically ran England for a quarter century. It makes you wonder, what are the modern ways people get hissed down? Online trolls, dismissive colleagues, that internal voice of self-doubt. Disraeli's absolute belief in himself, despite that public shaming and prejudice, it's just this incredible lesson in resilience, patience, and believing in your own worth, even when the world tries to shut you down.
Then there's Ichabod Washburn. Poor boy, born near Plymouth Rock, apprentice to a blacksmith in Worcester.
Yeah.
Marden says he was so painfully shy, he scarcely dared to eat in the presence of others. A huge personal hurdle. But he had this one incredibly clear, audacious goal. He would make the best wire in the world.
Which was crazy ambitious back then, right? Because some English company had a total monopoly on piano wire, had for a century. There was no good quality wire like that made in the US.
Right, but young Washburn had grit and was bound to succeed. His shyness didn't stop his ambition. Maybe it even focused it more intensely on the work itself. He didn't rely on charm. He relied on pure quality. Through relentless work, his wire became the standard everywhere, not just in America, globally. At one point, his factories were churning out 250,000 yards of iron wire daily, using 12 tons of metal, employing 700 people. He made a huge fortune, gave a lot away during his life, and left the rest to charity. Okay, let's unpack that. It's not just about the product. It's the vision overcoming that personal limitation. His shyness didn't stop him. It's such a powerful example of setting a huge goal, even when the market looks impossible, and just going after it with relentless grit. He didn't just want to make wire, he wanted the best wire. That focus, despite his personality, is an amazing lesson for anyone facing limitations or huge competitors.
And these stories, they consistently bring up another absolutely critical factor, almost a superpower. This relentless, sometimes obsessive pursuit of knowledge, often entirely through self-education, formal schooling. For many of these people, it was just impossible, a luxury they couldn't dream of. But their hunger to learn, their curiosity was just unstoppable. They improvised, sacrificed, and mastered complex subjects totally on their own terms, turning every spare moment into a classroom.
William Cobbett is an amazing, almost unbelievable example of this. He learned grammar fundamental skill, right? While he was a private soldier, earning just 6 pence a day. I mean, picture his study setup. No library, no desk. His seat to study in was the edge of his bunk or the hard guard bed, his bookcase, his knapsack, his writing table, a bit of board on his lap.
Unbelievable conditions.
Totally. He had no money for candles, so he could only study by the communal firelight when it was his turn. To buy a pen or paper, he literally had to forego some portion of his food, even though he was already in a state of half-starvation. And he did this surrounded by the noise of a barracks, talking, laughing, singing, whistling, and bawling from a dozen thoughtless men during their downtime. He even remembers crying like a kid when he lost a half-penny he was saving for a red herring, because that tiny amount was a great sum to him. It was his entire reserve fund.
And reflecting on this incredible feat, Cobbett basically threw down a challenge. He said, if I, under such circumstances, could encounter and overcome this task, can there be in the world a youth to find any excuse for its non-performance? And that hits hard today, doesn't it? It raises this really important, maybe uncomfortable question for us. What are our excuses? In an age with information everywhere, free online courses, digital libraries, endless knowledge just seconds away on our phones, what are we actually doing with our leisure moments? Cobbett's story forces us to look at our own comforts and ask how committed we really are to learning. It redefines what a real barrier looks like.
And then there's Abraham Lincoln, the mill boy of the slashes, became the 16th president through sheer self-driven effort. He told his friend Greene once that he'd talked to great men and couldn't see how they were inherently different. He figured their knowledge was just acquired. So, determined to enter public life, he'd walk 7 or 8 miles just to go to debating clubs, call it practicing polemics. He decided he had to study grammar, so he asked the local schoolmaster, Mentor Graham, for advice.
And the only grammar book around, Kirkham's, was 6 miles away. Lincoln didn't hesitate. Got up from breakfast, walked there, borrowed it, and by that night he was deep in its mysteries. For weeks, he put every moment of his leisure into mastering it, reciting rules to his friend Greene, asking Graham for help when he got stuck. This wasn't just reading, it was active, relentless work.
And his enthusiasm was apparently contagious. The whole neighborhood got interested. The Greenes lent him books, Graham helped, and the village cooper, the barrel maker, even let him come to his shop at night and keep a fire going with wood shavings so he'd have enough light to read by. He used every single resource, no matter how basic. After he mastered grammar, he famously told Greene, "Well, if that's what they call science, I think I'll go at another." He realized something profound, and he'd made another discovery that he could conquer subjects. It wasn't just grammar. It was the realization of his own power to learn.
That's so fascinating, right? And maybe one of Marden's most powerful points here. Lincoln wasn't just learning facts, he was learning how to learn. His story is this amazing blueprint for lifelong learning. It's built on pure internal motivation, using every single resource available, even wood shavings, and crucially, discovering your own intellectual capacity. It shows that curiosity, persistence, and asking for help can overcome almost any lack of formal schooling. It's about building that learning muscle, understanding that mastery is an active, ongoing thing, not just something you achieve once.
And we have to mention Elihu Burritt, the learned blacksmith. His dedication was just off the charts. He kept this diary with entries that are just mind-boggling. Imagine reading this. Monday, June 18, headache, 40 pages Cuvier's Theory of the Earth, 64 pages of French, 11 hours forging. He was working as a blacksmith. Tuesday, June 19, 60 lines Hebrew, 30 Danish, 10 lines Bohemian, 9 lines Polish, 15 names of stars, 10 hours forging. He ended up mastering 18 languages and 32 dialects.
It's almost unbelievable. Edward Everett, the famous orator, said about Burritt's learning, "It is enough to make one who has good opportunities for education hang his head in shame." His dedication wasn't just admirable, it was a direct challenge to anyone with more advantages. It proves that deep learning isn't about fancy institutions. It's about intense internal drive and disciplined self-improvement.
So let's bring this back to you again. What does this mean today? With all the apps, the online courses, the free resources everywhere, what are we really capable of if we just dedicated a fraction of Burritt's focus? What new skill, what subject could you conquer just by using your leisure moments with even a tiny bit of that same single-minded dedication? The powerful thought. Now, beyond just surviving and learning, many of these figures didn't just endure. They built huge enterprises. They turned those humble beginnings into the actual foundation of their success. And they were guided by principles they learned in those early tough times. Look at A.T. Stewart. Huge name in retail, incredibly wealthy. But he started as a school teacher in New York, making $300 a year. He quit pretty quickly, realized that wasn't his path, and went into merchandising. Achieved, as Marden puts it, success almost without precedent.
And it wasn't luck. It was his invariable rules, as Marden calls them. Absolute honesty. A strict one-price policy, which was revolutionary then, bargaining was normal. Cash on delivery. And doing business on business principles, meaning no favors, no shortcuts, just ethical, systematic operations. Marden says absolute regularity and system reigned in every department. Over 50 years, he made $40 million. And what's really amazing is how committed he was to those principles, even when it cost him. When he was nominated for Secretary of the Treasury in 1869, there was a law preventing merchants from holding that office. Stuart immediately offered to either completely resign from his huge business or give all its profits to the poor of New York while he was in office.
Wow, he really offered that.
He did. President Grant actually declined the offer, but it makes you ask, doesn't it? How often do we stick to our principles when faced with, an easier path, more prestige, more money? Stuart's success was built entirely on trust and ethics, non-negotiable for him.
Then there's John Jacob Astor, the fur tycoon, America's first multimillionaire. Left home in Germany at 17, tattooed dollars in 3 resolutions. To be honest, to be industrious and not to gamble. That was his starting capital. Started in a fur store, $2 a week plus board.
And he just dove in. Learned the business inside out, started his own operations pretty quickly, gave personal attention to every single detail. He'd roam the woods himself, trading with Native Americans, then crossed the Atlantic to sell the furs for huge profits in England. He went where the opportunity was, no matter how tough. Became the world's leading fur dealer. And as he got richer, Marden says his idea of a fortune expanded faster than his acquisitions. He kept thinking bigger, saw the potential in land in a growing America, invested heavily, became the country's richest real estate owner. But it all goes back to those 3 simple resolutions, right? Honesty, industry, no gambling. Combined with relentless work and strategic vision, that was his real capital. Character and discipline were his investment.
Marden shares this great little story about Astor. Someone asked him for a bigger donation to charity, pointing out that his son had given more, and Astor apparently just chuckled and said, "William has a rich father, mine was poor."
And that says so much, doesn't it? Inherited wealth is different from earned wealth. Those lessons Astor learned in poverty, the value of a dollar, the need for hard work, the discipline in those resolutions, they were priceless. They gave him a foundation. His son, despite his own advantages, never had to build in the same way. It's about a different kind of strength, one forged by scarcity.
And let's look at France for a minute, at Jacques Aristide Boucicaut and his store, the Bon Marché. Boucicaut started as just an employee in a small dry goods store outside Paris. Moved to the city, did well quickly through hard work, and by 1853 owned the small Bon Marché. But under his leadership it became, as Marden calls it, the most unique establishment in the world.
Because his idea was revolutionary. A combined philanthropic and commercial house. It wasn't just about profit, it was about building something sustainable and ethical that invested in people. He promoted employees based strictly on service length and value, offered free tuition, free medical care, a free library for staff. He even set up a fund that gave men some capital and women a marriage portion after 10 or 15 years of service. Totally groundbreaking stuff for employee welfare.
That's incredible for the time.
Absolutely. And he didn't stop there. He had a free public reading room, an art gallery for local artists. He was building a community, a true social enterprise. His family, after he died suddenly, they continued and expanded his vision, grew Bon Marché into this massive place, 108,000 square feet, 3,600 employees, $20 million in annual sales, which was enormous then. And crucially, they stuck to his core principles. Small profits, clearly marked prices, another innovation, easy returns. His spirit, Marden says, still pervaded the vast establishment. Mm-hmm. Such a powerful lesson in conscious capitalism, even back in the 19th century. Investing in your people and customers isn't just nice, it's the path to lasting ethical success.
Marden also really makes the point that success, defined this way, triumphing over obstacles, it's not just for business or politics. It happens in every single field.
Yeah.
Art, science, writing, labor, you name it. And often the key seems to be finding your authentic voice and just sticking with it. Take James Gordon Bennett, founder of the New York Herald. He started at 40, which is pretty late, collected his total assets, $300, set up a desk on 2 barrels in a cellar, did everything himself, typesetter, office boy, publisher, newsboy, clerk, editor, everything. And for 20 years before that, he had tried his best to imitate Benjamin Franklin's writing style, which everyone admired. And Marden says bluntly, he utterly failed.
20 years. He lost 2 decades trying to be someone else, trying to fit a mold that wasn't his. He finally found his real voice, showed what he was made of. In the Herald's salutatory, its first editorial, he declared, "Our only guide shall be good, sound, and practical common sense. We shall support no party, record facts, stripped of verbiage, with comments, just independent, fearless, and good-tempered." No, it really makes you ask, doesn't it? How much time do we waste trying to be someone else, follow someone else's style, fit some persona that isn't really us? Bennett's failure came from imitation. His success came when he dared to be just, independent, fearless, when he dared to be himself. Authenticity is just this incredibly powerful, though often hard-won, asset.
And Marden really drives this home by just listing example after example of successful people from humble backgrounds in all sorts of fields. It's not just the industrialists. You have Joseph Hunter, started as a carpenter; Robert Burns, the poet, a plowman; Keats, a druggist; Carlyle, the essayist, a mason; Hugh Miller, the geologist, a stonemason; Rubens, the painter, was a page; Swedenborg, scientist and mystic, a mining engineer; Dante and Descartes were soldiers; Ben Jonson, the playwright, laid bricks; Jeremy Taylor, the theologian, was a barber; Andrew Johnson, U.S. president, a tailor.
And it goes from their family backgrounds, too. Shows talent isn't inherited, doesn't care about social class. Cardinal Wolsey Defoe, Kirk White Butcher's sons. Michael Faraday, the great scientist blacksmith's son. Virgil Porter's son, Homer Farmer's son, Pope Merchant's son, Horace Shopkeeper's son, Demosthenes Cutler's son, Milton Money Scrivener's son, Shakespeare Wool Dealer's son, Cromwell Brewer's son. It just hammers home that ability and drive can come from absolutely anywhere, completely defying expectations about background or privilege.
And then there are the first jobs. People who started with incredibly low pay, showing that your starting salary doesn't define your endpoint. John Wanamaker, $1.25 a week. A.T. Stewart, we know, was a teacher. James Keene drove a milk wagon. Pulitzer stoked furnaces on a steamboat. Cyrus Field clerked in a store. George Childs was an errand boy for $4 a month. Carnegie started at $3 a week in a telegraph office. Huntington sold butter and eggs. Whitelaw Reid made $5 a week as a correspondent. Adam Forepaugh was a butcher.
And even women pioneers, facing way more restrictions back then, often started in equally humble roles. Sarah Bernhardt, the famous actress, was a dressmaker's apprentice. Adelaide Nielsen, another actress, was a child's nurse. Miss Braddon, the novelist, was a utility actress in small theaters. Charlotte Cushman, the American actress, came from poor parents. All these stories together just overwhelmingly show that your first job, your starting pay, your social standing at birth, none of it predicts where you'll end up. It's the internal drive, the spirit, the commitment to growth that really counts.
And finally, let's just quickly touch on Benjamin Franklin again. The ultimate self-taught genius. Left school for good at 12. Barely any formal education. At first, Marden says he did little but read. Just devoured books.
But he quickly realized very clearly that just reading alone would not make him an educated man, and he acted on it. Remember, he'd failed at arithmetic twice in school, gave up as hopeless. But at 14, he picks up Cocker's arithmetic again the third time, and this time, through sheer will and a systematic approach, he ciphered all through it with ease and pleasure. Then he masters navigation, which included geometry, tasted the inexhaustible charm of mathematics, as Marden puts it, did the same with writing, practiced relentlessly until, at 16, his anonymous articles were thought to be by the most learned men around.
So what does this mean for you today? Franklin's story just drives home that real education is this ongoing, self-driven thing. It's not just a phase you go through. Overcoming past failures like his struggle with math and actively applying yourself, that's what made him a master. He learned how to learn. He discovered he could conquer subjects. And that discovery was his real superpower. It's a great reminder that whatever you struggled with before, whatever you think you're bad at now, you can conquer it with a fresh approach, effort, and that same curiosity Franklin had.
And the chapter really builds to this powerful climax where success itself gets redefined. It's not about where you start, it's about the journey, the climb. It's a journey marked by resilience, by innovation that comes from having nothing, and by just sticking to your purpose. It's all about how you respond, how you adapt, how you keep pushing forward with the hand you are dealt, not just complaining about the cards.
Marden states it so clearly, right at the end. The most successful man is he who has triumphed over obstacles, disadvantages, and discouragements.
It completely flips the script on how we usually think about success. It's not about avoiding the hard path. It's about embracing the strength and character you gain from the hard path.
And he gives those final, powerful examples. Charles Goodyear, suffering poverty and failure for years in his makeshift lab until he finally figures out how to harden rubber, changing everything. Thomas Edison, patiently working away in a baggage car, a print shop, honing his genius until mysterious light and power glows and throbs at his command, lighting up the world. William Carey, the missionary, working at his cobbler's bench, nourishing the great purpose that eventually took his message all the way to India. These aren't stories of easy wins or lucky breaks. They're about relentless effort, unwavering vision, and just unbreakable belief against massive odds. The real victory was in the struggle itself. Yeah, these aren't just stories about famous dead guys. They are blueprints. Blueprints for grit, for self-belief, for the power of focused, sustained effort. They tell us loud and clear, your beginning does not define your end. That rough road, the tough start, it's not the barrier. It's the path that makes you into that Viking, as we just said. It's about setting your course, aiming for where you want to go, and then just relentlessly taking advantage of every single favoring circumstance, no matter how small it seems. It's up that spirit, that refusal to quit, that turns a starting line into a launch pad. So we've taken a pretty deep dive into how did he begin. We've unearthed this timeless, really practical wisdom that humble beginnings, even profound disadvantages, often act as the crucible that forges the strongest characters and the most enduring, meaningful kinds of success. We've seen through Marden's stories how lacking resources can actually spark invention, and how the sting of rejection can, weirdly enough, sharpen your determination into this unstoppable force.
And what's really striking is how these examples, even though they're from the 19th century, with totally different social structures, how powerfully they still resonate today. They're this constant reminder that those internal qualities, perseverance, resourcefulness, integrity, that endless thirst for learning, they're infinitely more important, more predictive, and just more empowering than whatever hand you happen to be dealt at the start. So it raises this important question for you listening right now as you think about your own journey. What humble beginning or what obstacle in your life, maybe past or present, could you look at now with fresh eyes and reframe? Reframe as a hidden strength, maybe, as the catalyst for your own Viking transformation.
So, as you go about your week, here's a thought to chew on, something provocative. If the most successful people, according to Marden, often started with less than nothing, what seemingly small advantage, what overlooked skill you possess, or what quiet internal determination are you maybe underestimating in yourself right now? Because that thing, that quiet, often uncelebrated quality, that might just be the very thing that helps you build your own empire. Brick by painstaking brick, word by precise word, or maybe even just one incredibly well-exhibited rat trap at a time. Join us next time for another deep dive into how to succeed.
Thanks for joining me on this chapter of How to Succeed. Remember, success doesn't start with skills or resources. It starts with who you are when no one's watching. If this episode gave you something to think about, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who's building themselves into something big. This is Mindset Foundations. I'll see you in the next chapter.